All right. Welcome to the Leadership Series. Today I'm speaking with Jen Scanlon, who is the Assistant Principal for Norwalk Public Schools. Thank you so much for joining, Jen.
Thank you for having me.
So, what inspired you to pursue a career in education?
So that's a great question. I think that when I was in high school, I always loved being around kids. I was always babysitting, I worked at the varsity club, and I knew that I had a passion for teaching. Um, and I was also on the paper at Stanford High, and I was a sports writer, sports editor. But did know that I wanted to possibly pursue education. So I went to Syracuse because it had the best of both worlds. And then when I was my freshman year at Syracuse, I realized I really wanted to pursue education. And I got into the School of Education, and I'm so happy. And it was the best decision that I ever made.
So, did you start your career as a teacher, or did you always know you wanted to go into administration?
So I started as a first grade teacher. My experience really had been more in the upper grades. I had student taught in third grade and in fourth grade. And I really didn't know much about first grade, but I knew I wanted to come back and teach in Stanford and teach in my hometown. And I got hired like 4 days before school started. And my principal at the time said to me, it's going to be the hardest, first grade is the hardest grade. So if you could teach that, you could teach anything. And that's where I started. And I absolutely loved teaching first grade. There's so much growth, but I kind of, as my career progressed, I then left the classroom and was a reading specialist. And then I had my admin degree, and I was deciding if I really wanted to pursue leadership and to kind of do the next step. And I came to Norwalk in 2014 because they had a job that was really focused on being assistant principal, but you also were really heavy in curriculum. And I really enjoyed doing a lot of professional development when I was in Stanford, and it seemed like the perfect fit. So then I went on to this leadership role in Norwalk, and I've been here ever since 2014.
Did you have any mentors or anybody who helped you through the way, through your journey?
Yes. So I tell people all the time that Mr. Tony Pavia, he was my high school principal. He came my senior year in high school, so I only had him for 1 year, but he made such an impact on me. He like knew every single kid. Um, he knew everybody's name. He made these connections with students, and I really admired him. And then he ended up going to New Canaan High School, and I coached cheerleading like after college, and I worked for him, and I did some of my admin work under him at New Canaan. And I remember him saying to me, he's like, don't be in such a rush. You have a long career ahead of you. Don't be in a rush to be an AP or a principal too soon, because then after that, then you're going to central office. And he would always say it's the big black hole. But he was right. I think I left at a great time. I didn't want to become too young. I wasn't too young when I became an admin. And I think he gave me some good advice. I have a long career ahead of me. And at the time, I listened to him, and I waited for the right job. And that's exactly where I landed.
So, what qualities do you think make you a great principal?
I think that I'm super organized when it comes to scheduling. Some days I have to think on my feet. Some days I have 8 people out, and I have to quickly figure out who's covering classes. I really do my best. I always think of Mr. Pavian, like I really connect with kids. I know probably something about one. I know something about each of my kids that go to school. I know all of their names. I know their families. I really thrive on getting to know the kids in my community and the families. And I think, I really try and give teachers feedback and be their biggest cheerleader, because being a classroom teacher is by far like the hardest job. So I really am there to support them. And I think that that's probably some of the strongest qualities that I have.
So, do you think it's more difficult to work with students or with the teachers because you deal with both worlds?
So it's a really great question. I really think it's the adults. The kids are just kids, and they, if I always say if we take the adults out of the equation, like we're just there for the kids, and I think that that's what's hard. I'm managing adults, right? That work extremely hard, but it's really. But a strong school community really relies on both. So, um, but what we do, and I just remind myself and I remind my staff that we're here for the kids. Like that's who we're here for. So we have to kind of put some things aside and just make sure that they're our number one priority while we have them.
Do you think that you've been held to different standards since you're a woman?
I think that education itself is very woman heavy. And I think that there's very few men in the field of education. So I can see, I don't know if we're definitely different standard, but because men are so far and few between and more rare, especially and maybe in an elementary setting or a K, I'm a K-8. I think that, you know, I sometimes have to maybe work harder than my male counterparts.
So, what strengths do you think women often bring to leadership roles?
Organization for number one, I think is huge, and being able to multitask, right? Not every woman is a mom and has a family, but being a mom and having that experience, I have twins, as you know, and just I naturally had to multitask having children. So then I'm naturally multitasking at work, managing, thinking about the 410 kids at my school. I'm managing my teachers, and then I manage my own life. So I think that women naturally are very tend to be more organized in that aspect. And I think that being a mom definitely has given me a different perspective. When I started teaching, I was 22 and I didn't have kids then. And as I've gotten older and become a mom, I really have a different lens of what it's like to be an educator and have to raise a family and have a different outlook on how I approach my everyday.
So, how do you balance your home, your family life, and your work life? Do you have any tips?
Well, I think that as I've gotten more experience, I've definitely been sometimes better at it. And it is hard because you want to come home and leave everything at school and be present for your family. It's definitely something that I'm still working on after all these years. It's hard not to like look at my emails or look at my phone, but I think the best thing is I always say, no one's aiming to school after me. The school will be there tomorrow. So if I need to be present for my family, that's what I have to do. And I think that it's hard. It's easier said than done. And I think that's in a lot of roles, right? A lot of parents or a lot of working women feel like they have to always still, you know, be married to work or check their email when they're going to be home. But I think the best advice is really like life is short. And so you want to be able to spend as much time with your family while you can, and your job will always be there the next day.
So, over the years, as you've been teaching and in administration, have the students ever taught you any lessons?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So this one boy, he's in eighth grade now. He does not remember the story, but I tell him, and he's like, that wasn't me, but it was. So when he was in kindergarten, he just was having a terrible day. He threw himself on the ground. He just did not want to talk to me, nothing. And so I was like, get up, Joel. And he's like, no, no. Like, he just tantrum. So my social worker had come over, Mrs. Fuzeshi, and she got on the floor with him and started playing, brought Legos and started playing like, whatever it was. And all of a sudden he just was distracted, playing with the Legos. And maybe 5 minutes later, and she's like, are you ready? Are you ready to go? Are you ready to stand up and not be on the floor? And he shook his head. And like that moment I realized, Like he didn't care what I had to say. He really needed a moment, and she distracted him. So I call it the Nancy Fuseschi moment method, and I've used it probably a dozen times since she taught me that lesson. That sometimes kids, he wasn't listening to me in that moment, and he really needed his a minute to decompress. And her by bringing over these Legos, that's what he needed, and he's in eighth grade now, graduating, and he's not he's like, that wasn't me. I'm like, yeah, because you don't remember, but it was. I tell him all the time that he taught me such a lesson that I'll never forget.
So, what advice would you give to young women that are looking to follow in your footsteps and work in education?
So I love that you asked me that because the past 2 years, I was asked to go to Syracuse and do talk to incoming potential kids that want to be teachers. And this past year, I presented with one of my old roommates. She's my sorority sister. She's an educator too. And I really like loved talking to them and like the potential about them wanting to be teachers and about what Syracuse, could be any school, but it just happened to be that was sharing about what Syracuse could really offer them. And I think that being a teacher, it's like one of the most rewarding jobs. I love seeing kids out and about, and they call me Miss Dang and I don't even flinch. I'm like, or now kids that know that I never was Miss Dang and I've only been Miss Scanlon to them. I love seeing kids that I've had and like seeing what they're doing now, and that the impact that I've had on their lives for such a short period of time, and to see where they are. Um, I think teaching is really hard, but it's a wonderful job where like nobody can do any job without having a teacher or having a good educator. So I just try and let people know that we need good teachers out there, and it really you have the chance to like completely change someone's life, and that's a special gift to have. And so I would recommend to anybody to be a teacher.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.